Wells Fargo CEO Tim Sloan has been talking to us, saying he's prepared to stay at the helm until he's 65. He told Bloomberg News in a phone interview, quote, "I'll stay in this role as long as the board believes that I'm the right person for the role." And they do, and I think I am. It could be as long as tomorrow, so somewhere between tomorrow and 7 years. For more, let's bring in our finance reporter, Katherine Chiglinsky. Great perspective coming in terms of his determination to stay and to enact changes, which mean a lot of job cuts.
Of course, and we learned this week that they actually have plans for a lot of job cuts, to as much as 10% of their workforce, which is a fairly sizable number. Could be as much as 26,000 people. I think this comes at an interesting time, right? He's 2 years into the role. We're coming up on kind of his anniversary of becoming CEO. And it's interesting to weigh, what's changed at Wells Fargo, because a lot has happened since then. We had the fake account scandal, but then we've also had little events in between, including the Federal Reserve's cap on their asset growth. And it's caused a lot of challenges for the bank. How does Tim Sloan kind of keep in charge and make sure that the bank is growing where it needs to be and cleaning up kind of the mess that started around 2 years ago?
So how much of his job is devoted to cleaning up the mess versus growing the bank but not being able to grow the assets? Because that's the challenge, isn't it?
Definitely, and I think I think it's a hard balance, because there's a lot of things that have come to light over the past couple of years, including kind of a low-income housing credit scandal, and I think there's a lot to be cleaned up. And it's also harder to grow when the Federal Reserve kind of has eyes on you. So for Sloan, I think that's a huge challenge.
He says it's now an execution phase. They're focusing on investor return. I mean, finally, some music to the investor base's ears.
Of course. And, that's good news, because Wells Fargo has been one of the worst performing stocks in the KBW Bank Index over the past year. And so I think it's good news for investors to hear that the bank is really focusing on ways that they can grow and ways that they can kind of clean up after this.
There's another quote from your story in which he said, "Sometimes we haven't moved as quickly as I would have liked, and part of that is because of my leadership. When I look back and say, gosh, I think we've made all the right decisions, but are there some that I wish we could have moved more quickly on?" Absolutely. What might he be referring to here?
I'm not exactly sure, what decisions he feels that maybe they've moved too slowly, but I do think it's a good sign that a CEO is kind of reflective of the 2 years in which he's been in charge. It's been a crazy 2 years. A lot has been announced. There's been a lot of challenges. And for him to say, hey, we're looking at it, and we're trying to figure out, what are the bits that have made me kind of skeptical of it or concerned about the growth, I think that's a good sign from Sloan.
What about the environment in which we're currently in? We're seeing rates rising at the moment. There's much talk that will help the domestically focused banks that little bit more than the internationally focused ones at the moment. Where does Wells Fargo stand when it talks about growth opportunities that Tim Sloan is saying he's seeing?
I think that's the interesting point here, right? Because Wells Fargo, they have a lot of different operations, retail banking, wealth management. The higher interest rates will definitely help them, but they're constrained. That Federal Reserve cap is kind of a limiting factor on exactly where Wells Fargo can go and how much it can provide for investors. But we're also starting from a point of it's been a rough 2 years. They're the second worst performing stock in that KBW Bank Index. If they can turn things around, maybe it'll be a potentially good growth story.